This may be a ramble of thoughts, but after I recently stumbled upon this sub, I finally felt a place I could offer something that my family and I experienced a few years ago. And to this day it gives me a shiver. I've been camping, solo backpacking, and hunting my whole life in Oregon, and felt comfortable in the woods, and have a deep respect for nature. A few years ago, my wife, daughter, and 2 German Shepherds went camping north of Mount Jefferson in Oregon. I've included the coordinates of our campsite, which we found to be the perfect setup for us and our 2 dogs, who definitely need the privacy since they are intimidating other dog owners, and can be loud when spooked. It was not an established campsite, just a horseshoe off a USFS road that had flat ground, full trees, and a fire pit. The first night my daughter wanted to sleep by herself in a 2-man tent right next to ours. It was maybe 2 feet away from me and my wife's tent. We had the male German Shepherd Gus sleep with her in her tent. That whole first night, neither my wife or I could sleep. We both heard footsteps, and they were heavy, not like typical forest critters scampering around in the night. I was well armed because I was paranoid from reading recently before departing about my dad in California, who was shot and killed in a tent next to his 2 infant daughters. Needless to say, both of my wife and I had 2 pistols and my rifle with me. The dogs are great at detection, and that's why I felt my daughter could sleep alone, because Gus is completely fearless, and nothing would lay a hand on her without a battle to the death. All in all, nothing but bad vibes and loud footsteps occurred that night, which I ultimately decided was a deer, or maybe some elk. Day 2. We go for a walk around the road, maybe 300 feet away from the circle area in the photo. I see an abandoned road where a rusted gate post was covered in vegetation. Something of a blue color caught my eye, and Gus immediately takes off running down this road. My heart begins to race because I think it's another family camping like us, and he's going to get himself shot or scare some innocent people to death. So I chase after him as fast as I can, and the rest follow. He stops after 20 foot into the road and me yelling his name. But I have covered just enough distance to see that there is nobody there, and something is off about this site. I yell, "Hello, is anyone here? Sorry about the dog," and got no response. My curiosity gets the best of me, and I have to see what the site actually is. As I get closer, I know something is wrong. It had all the necessities for a campsite, including a cooler, propane burner, tent, blankets, folding table, but every single item had been completely destroyed, smashed, and even torn for what appeared to be claw marks. We all walked around in circles, puzzled why anyone would leave their camping gear behind, including an expensive REI tent. I figured, well, someone left in a hurry and the animals got to the rest. It's the only logical explanation. Still, a propane tank and cooler were flattened by something, and it certainly wasn't a snowpack with tree covered in that spot. As the afternoon rolls in, me and my daughter are playing bocce ball at the campsite, and my wife goes walking maybe 70 feet north to do her business. I do not have direct line of sight on her, but all of a sudden I see Gus make a mad dash straight towards her. Normally he would always be with me unless he is called over, and she didn't call for him. His speed and focus caught my attention, and I knew something weird was happening. So I ran over there, and my wife starts jogging at me, and I immediately draw my pistol. Gus has completely continued running into the forest another 100 foot before I call him, and he stopped. My other dog, Leah, who never misses the opportunity to be part of the pack leader, is not taking point. I have had her for 7 years now, and this was the first time in her life she refused to leave my daughter's side. She was full hair raised and attached to us at the hip. Again, anytime we play or hike, Leah's up front, bossing everything in her path, and pauses to look and see where we are. I asked my wife what happened. She said, "I was trying to pee, and all of a sudden I felt all the hairs raised, and I know someone was watching. Then I saw Guts running towards me, and I just got up and started moving towards you." We spent 10 minutes looking for signs of anything. Saw no trails, absolutely no broken branches, and nothing to point to what or where something went. We decided we were spending one more night since it's too late to pack up and drive, but we will all be in the big tent together. Before we go to bed, I put a rope with a makeshift coin alarm around the perimeter of our campsite. I used a mint can, some coins, and keys from our truck. Zip-tied it so anything hitting the rope gave it a little jingle. Very unsophisticated, but it put my wife at ease. As I go to tie my last corner off at a tree near our tent, a third mystery item unveils itself. It looks like someone has done the exact same thing I have done with a rope that was so old and brown, and somehow I didn't see it at first. It was broken and only had a few pieces remaining, but sure enough it was tied at roughly the same height as mine, 8 to 10 inches off the ground, and even had a few rusted washers on it. I immediately felt someone had stayed here before and put the exact same makeshift warning system on the same tree, maybe 10 to 15 years ago based on the condition of the rope. Perhaps my paranoia has now reached a new height, but I had to make sure the girls felt we were safe. And at the time, the only thing I could think of was when the evening came around, I made them sit in the truck and I fired a clip from my .45 into the dirt, as a signal to whatever was out there that we are armed. I reassured the girls that anybody listening to that now knows we have 2 wolves and we are armed. We are way too risky of a target, so we can sleep safely tonight. That night we heard no footsteps, and the dogs never perked up and barked. We left early the next morning. Fast forward to today, and I watched the Amazon's Missing 411 Hunted documentary. I noticed the cluster smack dab close to where we camped that weekend, and a flood of dread rushes me as I think about that mysterious abandoned campsite, the one with the ripped up tent, smashed cooler, and cooking top. We have been camping since, and have enjoyed the beauty of the Northwest. But there was definitely something there that could have possibly took or harmed someone less than 300 feet away from where we camped. We all thank our lucky stars Guts was there to do his thing so well that afternoon. So a few months ago, I was out hiking with my friend. We live in the mountains of western Maryland, and we were about 6 miles into an 8-mile loop we have done frequently when we decided to take some pictures and eat a snack at a summit. This area of the trail had a park, benches and tables, and a parking lot. We were sitting talking, and I noticed a man just walking around the parking lot alone. He was walking aimlessly and staring at his feet. What confused me was that he was in jeans and a button-down shirt, not exactly hiking attire. We decided to set off into the last 2-mile leg of the loop. This part goes down the hill to the headquarters of the park, and is cut out of the mountain/bank. The end of that leg is the parking lot where our car is. You don't have a lot of visibility from the trail, and you have to walk single file. I was walking in front, and talking to my friend. I turned to look at her and see the same man right behind her, following at a rudely close distance. I immediately got a gut-wrenching feeling. I noticed that he didn't have any pack or hiking gear, and was not even wearing boots. Something about his eyes really spooked me. So a bit more walking and he continues to follow very closely. I say to my friend that I have to tie my shoe as a reason to step off the trail and let him pass us, in case he is only following closely because he wants to go faster than we are. She immediately catches on to what I'm doing and we pull over. He looks startled and says hello politely, and then he just stares. This is when I notice that he is carrying a stick. As I'm fiddling with my shoe and she stands between us, he passes us. We wait to give him some distance ahead of us, and he immediately slows down. We wait for a bit longer, and he gets to the furthest part of the trail, and then turns around and is just looking up at us. We decide that something feels way too wrong about this guy, and we don't want to have to pass him again. So we turn around and walk back up to the trail towards the park with the tables in the parking lot. A few minutes of walking up the trail, and I look back to see him walking up the trail too. He's now following us again. I tell my friend to walk faster. We book it up the trail and get to the parking area where we were at before. We start to strategize and wait, deciding that we will wait to see if he comes back up the trail. There are people around here, so we felt a lot safer waiting it out. About 20 minutes go by and nothing. We are talking about how that could mean that he kept going on the trail and is long gone, or is waiting on the trail where he is more deserted. We see a couple come up from the trail where we were, presumably taking the loop in the opposite direction that we were. We approach them and ask if they saw anyone on the trail between this lot and next. They tell us they saw a young man sitting on a rock about halfway down. They proceed to describe the man who was indeed following us. We explain our interaction to him to the wife, and get into a conversation back and forth about whether or not he was an actual threat. The husband finally interjects and says, "We need to call a ranger." He wasn't just sitting there, he had a knife and was carving a stick. Needless to say, we called that ranger. The nice couple walked that last leg with us to make sure we got to our car safely, and then gave us our numbers in case we needed anything. The rangers then walked the trail, but there was no sight of him. I wish I knew where he went and what happened to him, but I'm glad to know that my instincts are legitimate. So creepy knife-carrying man in the woods, let's not meet again. I wasn't sure where to post this, but after all these years, this whole event still seems paranormal. I don't know what to make of it, so sharing for any perspective or feedback. When I was 9 months old, my dad drowned in a freak accident. He was helping friends loose a canoe that had gotten stuck in the river. The undertow snagged him, and no one ever saw him alive again. Found him a few days later, a couple miles down the river. 20 years later, I am camping with my girlfriend, and my best bro and his girlfriend. It's been a beautiful summer night, packed in the Northwest. It was about 9:30 p.m., so mostly dark. My bro and I hiked a short trip to this rock overhang that had a perfect view of the river. Lit up some cigarettes, sipped on a beer, and chatted. 2 minutes in, this happens. Across the riverbank, I see my dad standing there staring at me. I don't remember knowing him, but I do have an image of him in my mind from pictures. He looked exactly like my dad did at the time he died. I hit my friend and asked him if he's seeing the scene, but he doesn't. Then a sort of spotlight blasts my dad, and he immediately breaks the stare and walks to his left about 20 foot down the river, as well as a little back into the trees. He starts pulling some tools and a rope out of a cachet bag. At this point I am pale and shaking. My friend worried because I'm staring into the dark and not responding. But wow, what was I seeing? The whole other side of the riverbank was now a stage, lit up, and my dad was working on something with his back to me. He finally turns around and he has a noose in his hands. He throws it over a tree branch and proceeds to slip it around his neck, saying absolutely nothing, and then hangs himself to death while staring at me. We had an odd experiences for the rest of the night, but nothing like that. I'm now 41 and still haven't integrated this experience. It really messed me up, and I can't help but wonder, did he really drown, or is that what I was told? I had numerous close calls with suicide as a young adult, but never by hanging. Was my dad telling me a hidden truth, or was that somebody else entirely? It's definitely been a strange one. These events occurred 2 summers ago in the Grand Teton area. My boyfriend at the time, now husband, let's call him H, was an avid outdoorsman and also served in the military. I was an ecology major and wanted to spend more time outdoors, so he decided to take me on my first backpacking trip, just the 2 of us. For those who aren't familiar, the Grand Tetons are well known for their wildlife, specifically grizzly bears. My only experience with bears up to this point was watching a little black bear cross the road from the safety of my car. Seeing grizzly country signs around every corner wasn't doing much to calm my nerves. My boyfriend looked like Indiana Jones, machete hanging from his belt, large knives attached to each of his side, bear spray strapped to his waist. You get the picture. The beginning of our 25-mile journey was all uphill. When in bear country, you're supposed to make noise, not to startle wildlife by accidentally sneaking up on it. As you can imagine, going up a steep hill while carrying a 40-pound pack makes it difficult to make a conversation. We were an hour in, and almost at the top of the ascent. I noticed that the woods had gone completely silent, save for the rushing stream that was to our left of the trail. Silent woods are never a good sign. This usually indicates a predator is nearby. At this point I was in front of my boyfriend, and we were about to crest the hill. For the past 20 minutes we had not said a word to each other, having been too tired to speak. We noticed the silence at the same time, and gave each other knowing glances. I came up over on the top of the hill, and immediately froze. Sitting not 10 feet in front of me in the middle of the trail was a grizzly bear. My husband wasn't aware yet, as he was behind me, so I did the first thing I could think of. While still in my frozen stance, I managed to take my arm and start flinging it wildly behind me, trying to get H's attention. I was too terrified to speak. The bear went from sitting to all fours, not looking away from us once. H quickly swung around me so that I was behind him, and he just started yelling. Being in the military, he knows how to yell. The grizzly wasn't quite phased as it started to walk slowly towards us. At this point, I was on the verge of passing out from terror. This bear was about 5 feet in front of us when we heard a loud crack coming from the woods. The bear heard it too, and bolted towards the stream. A second crack boomed again, this time much closer than before. H said it's probably just some falling branches, but we both knew that wasn't the case. At this point, we were walking quickly up the trail in an attempt to create some distance from the grizzly and those strange noises. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand straight up, and at the same moment H stopped moving in front of me. He turned around to look at me, and I turned to look behind me. To this day, we are not sure what we saw. Back where we were standing, there was a large black-brown mass. It looked to be 3 times bigger than the already large grizzly bear that we had just seen a few moments before. Its back was facing us, and then it stood up on its back legs. It looked similar to a bear, but something about the shape was just off. At this point, I was probably stupid to run away, but that's exactly what we did. We were aware of heavy footsteps behind us, but neither of us looked back. The footsteps eventually faded. At this point, I was a mess. H was doing his best to console me. Honey, this is extremely unusual. The bears usually stay away from humans. We're gonna be okay. I'm sure that won't happen again. That was enough to convince me to continue on the backpack. Not an hour later, though, we reached a clearing where we decided to take a rest and eat a snack. About a minute after we sat down, I noticed the bushes moving in a line towards the clearing. Toward us. Out of this brush comes this adolescent grizzly who looks just as spooked as we did. But he came straight for us. H, being the crazy nut that he is, decided to charge back at the bear while screaming bear spray at the ready. That did the trick, and the bear ended up running off. All I could think was, just my luck. But that wasn't even close to what happened the second night. Before we began to backpack, we had let the ranger station know which trails and route we'd planned to take. With this information, they usually send a ranger on horseback at some point during the backpack to check on you and to make sure everything is okay. There were not many approved trails left for us to choose from, and it was just our luck that they were the most difficult. Apparently over the 3 days we were on those trails, we had been the sole hikers. We didn't see a single other person once when we were en route. Anyhow, I guess we missed the ranger who came to check on us. We had been following hoof prints the entire second day, and we hadn't seen any the day before. I had some foot problems, so we spent valuable daylight trying to adjust my boots, the laces, socks to compensate for the pain. When we started on the trail again, we had maybe an hour or 2 of daylight left, and in the woods, it gets dark fast. I was exhausted, and it was now dark out, and H was the only one with a working headlamp, as mine wouldn't even turn on for some reason. We needed to find somewhere to set up camp. As well, we still needed to eat. It was freezing, and the wind was howling, and it was creating a howling sound as it rushed through the trees, which made it difficult to hear H or discern any other sounds coming from the woods. After another hour of hiking through the dark, we found a clearing. Well, it was more like a bowl. It looked to be 200 meters in diameter, with both sides being 10 meters down from the trail to the bottom of the clearing. This place was strange, and we both felt it, though he didn't tell me how freaked out he was until after we'd left. There was no moonlight, so all we had was the illumination of his headlamp, our small camp stove, and the flashlight I fished out from my pack. Half the trees were dead and fallen, just in the bowl. The vegetation everywhere else was very dense. To help alleviate my anxiousness, he started playing Ninja Sex Party out of his portable speaker. This didn't help much, as it just echoed off the trees, creating a dissonance of sounds. He also thought it would ward off any predators nearby. This is when we knew our anxiousness wasn't paranoia. The silence was back. The silence was back, and there hadn't been a single bird chirp since we arrived at the clearing. It also may have to do with the obnoxious music, but because of our previous experience, we decided to turn off the music and head into the tent. Also, it was freezing. As soon as we were situated in our sleeping bags, we heard deep cracks and thuds echoing from the trees beyond. Falling trees? There had been a lot of wildfires and very little rain this season. We both froze. That sound wasn't an echo, and it came from inside the clearing. Definitely not a falling tree. It came from right outside the tent. We both stopped breathing. H's hand found mine, and we clung to one another, paralyzed. Something dragged across the outside of our tent, making an indent as it went along. It was thin, almost like a finger. "What is it?" I whispered, shaking. I don't know. It shouldn't be a person. We're the only one on this side of the mountain. I was trying my hardest to stifle sobs, trying to listen to what was on the outside. I could hear steps, but couldn't decipher what it was. The steps stopped, and then the whole side of the tent slowly pushed inwards. At this point, whatever was outside knew we were inside, so I shined my flashlight at the side of the tent. What I saw made my blood run cold. It was the shape of a human face pressed against the tent. I could make out the nose and open mouth, and each time they breathed, it made the tent around the mouth billow in and out. H said, "Fuck that," pulled out a Glock from his sleeping bag and cocked it. The sound shattered across the silence. The face pulled back, and we heard fast footsteps heading towards the edge of the clearing. We didn't leave the tent until the sun was shining the next morning. The first thing we noticed was the smell of urine. We came out of the tent and looked around. Whoever it was had peed on our coals we had left in the fire, leaving a disgusting stench of evaporated pee. Footprints surrounded our tent, circling around multiple times. Muddy handprints decorated the outside of our tent. Well, we think it was mud anyway. Wildlife is not the most dangerous thing in the backcountry.